It began like any other summer night in Stillwater, Oklahoma, back in June of 2003. The neighborhood was quiet, the streets empty except for the occasional passing car or porch light flickering in the distance. But on one grainy CCTV camera pointed toward the sidewalk of Willow Creek Apartments, a figure emerged just after midnight. The footage shows a man leaving the building, struggling slightly as he carried a white laundry basket down the street. He walked briskly, his face obscured by shadows. At one point, he glanced over his shoulder before vanishing behind a corner convenience store. To most, the footage seemed uneventful. Just another late-night errand in a college town. No one knew then that inside that basket was the severed head of a young woman who had once been full of life and promise. By the next morning, at around 7:30 a.m., a construction worker hauling debris to a dumpster on nearby Main Street noticed something strange. Amid drywall scraps and broken tiles sat a pile of clothes, male and female, some stained dark. On top lay a pair of red slippers, their fabric stiff with blood. When he looked closer, he saw a small kitchen knife with a serrated edge, its handle smeared in dried crimson. Shaken, the worker reported it to his foreman, and soon after, Stillwater police were called. At first, officers weren't sure what to make of it. Clothing and old shoes in a dumpster weren't unusual near a renovation site. But the blood was unmistakable. Something terrible had happened. Meanwhile, across town, Karen Mitchell was getting increasingly anxious. Her daughter, 22-year-old Rachel Morgan, hadn't answered any calls since the previous evening. Rachel, who was 8 months pregnant, lived in a small second-floor apartment at Willow Creek. Karen had last spoken to her around 9 p.m. on June 8th. Since then, nothing. By late morning, Karen drove to the apartment, uneasy with each passing minute. At 12:56 p.m., Karen arrived and used her spare key to let herself inside. Neighbors later recalled seeing her run back out onto the stairwell just minutes later, her face pale, her body trembling. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Her words were frantic, her voice shaking. "My daughter's dead. He killed her. He cut off her head." The dispatcher tried to calm her, but the horror in Karen's tone said everything. First responders arrived at 1:02 p.m. Officers climbed the narrow stairwell to Rachel's second-floor unit. The door was unlocked. Inside, the apartment was eerily still. In the bedroom, they found a body lying on the bed. A towel was wrapped around the head, but when officers pulled it back, they realized the head was gone. It had been severed and taken. Veteran officers later admitted it was one of the most disturbing crime scenes they had ever witnessed. Not only had Rachel Morgan been brutally murdered, but her unborn child had been robbed of life as well. Neighbors gathered outside, whispering and staring in disbelief. Stillwater was not a city untouched by crime, but nothing like this had ever happened here before. For them, the apartment building that had always been filled with the ordinary, people taking out trash, kids playing on the steps, college students coming and going, was now the epicenter of horror. Rachel's mother sat on the curb sobbing as paramedics tried to console her. She was pregnant, Karen kept repeating, her voice breaking. She had her whole life ahead of her. Inside the apartment, detectives scoured for clues. No murder weapon was present. There were signs of a struggle, overturned furniture, scattered belongings, but no immediate indication of forced entry. Whoever had killed Rachel had been inside willingly, and they had left carrying pieces of her body. The gruesome discovery shocked the small community, but it was only the beginning of a case that would stretch on for decades before the final truth came to light. This was no ordinary homicide. This was a crime that would leave scars on Stillwater for years to come. To understand the full tragedy of what happened in Stillwater in June 2003, we need to step back and look at the life of Rachel Morgan. Rachel was born on August 3, 1981, in Payne County, Oklahoma. From the very beginning, She was known for her big smile and her soft, nurturing spirit. Her mother, Karen Mitchell, described her as the kind of child who was always helping. Whether it was rescuing stray kittens or volunteering to watch younger cousins during family gatherings. At just 10 years old, Rachel showed a remarkable compassion that set her apart. Instead of asking for toys or gifts for her birthday that year, she asked friends and relatives to donate to a local no-kill animal shelter in Stillwater. That instinct for kindness and care never left her. Through her teenage years, Rachel was energetic and deeply social. She played softball in middle school, joined the choir in high school, and was known for being the one who could lighten any room with her laugh. A close friend remembered, "She had this way of making everyone feel like they mattered, like they were seen." She graduated from Stillwater High School in 1999, then took a part-time job at a Dairy Queen on Main Street. Customers remembered her for her quick jokes and warm smile, but Rachel wasn't just there for the paycheck. She had bigger plans. Like her mother, she wanted to work in healthcare, possibly as a nurse or medical technician. Her mother later said, she wanted to help people. That was her heart all the way through. By 2003, Rachel was well on her way to building her adult life. She rented a small but cozy second-floor apartment at Willow Creek, not far from the college district. Friends would often stop by to hang out on her porch, where she liked to sit in the evenings scrolling through her phone or writing in her journal. She was also 8 months pregnant at the time of her death. The pregnancy wasn't easy. She battled morning sickness and stress from a troubled relationship. But she looked forward to the baby. The family had started calling the unborn child Peanut as a nickname, even though Rachel hadn't settled on a name yet. Invitations for her baby shower had just gone out the week before. Baby clothes were already folded in a small dresser in her bedroom. Friends recall her talking about paint colors for a nursery, even though she knew she'd have to squeeze the crib into her apartment for the time being. Her mother later reflected, she was just excited. Nervous but excited. She wanted that baby more than anything. But alongside her dreams, Rachel carried a heavy burden. She had been in a turbulent on-again, off-again relationship with a man named Marcus Hill, someone who had entered her life nearly 2 years earlier. At first, Marcus seemed charming, funny, and attentive, but over time, the relationship became toxic. He had a history of drug use, anger issues, and instability that spilled directly into Rachel's life. Her co-workers noticed the changes. Rachel would show up late to shifts, sometimes with bruises around her arms or a black eye. When asked, she'd give excuses. Her dog had jumped on her. She'd bumped into something. Eventually, though, she confided in one of her managers that Marcus had been violent. One co-worker later recalled, she was the kind of person who always wanted to see the best in people. Even when he hurt her, she kept hoping he would change. The people around Rachel, her mom, her friends, even her boss, saw the pattern of abuse and worried constantly. On more than one occasion, Karen tried to convince her to leave Marcus for good, and at times, Rachel did. There were weeks where she stayed with her mom or with friends, away from him, but Marcus always came back, and Rachel, hopeful and forgiving, always gave him another chance. By early 2003, the couple had moved into Rachel's apartment together. The pregnancy bound them closer, at least in her eyes. She wanted to build a family, to make it work for the sake of her unborn daughter. But for those who knew her best, the signs of strain were clear. One friend later said, she was glowing from being pregnant, but she was exhausted. You could see it in her eyes. She wanted stability. She just didn't get it with him. Despite the struggles, Rachel remained a loving daughter, friend, and expectant mother. She still laughed easily, still talked about her dreams of nursing school, still planned for a future she would never get to see. On the afternoon of June 8, 2003, less than 10 hours before her death, Rachel was captured on CCTV sitting on her porch around 2 p.m., scrolling on her phone. It looked like any other moment in her young life. Quiet, ordinary, full of untapped possibility. No one watching her that day could have known that by nightfall, Rachel Morgan's life, and the life of her unborn child, would be brutally stolen. The tragedy of Rachel Morgan's murder cannot be separated from the man she was with, Marcus Hill. Marcus, also 22 at the time, was a Stillwater native. He had grown up in a fractured home environment, bouncing between relatives' houses and struggling with both substance use and anger issues. According to his half-sister Tanya, Marcus had been drifting for years. She later recalled, "He never really had a place of his own. He'd stay with a girlfriend or crash with friends, or come to my mom's for a while. Whenever things got bad, he just moved on to the next place." This instability spilled directly into his relationship with Rachel. The two met in their late teens, and their connection was fast and intense. For Rachel, Marcus brought excitement and attention. For Marcus, Rachel represented stability, something he lacked. But almost immediately the cracks began to show. By 2001, their relationship was already volatile. They broke up and reconciled repeatedly, often within the span of days. Neighbors would hear shouting matches followed by long stretches of silence, only to see them together again the next week. And as the months passed, the fights turned violent. Rachel began arriving at her Dairy Queen shifts with bruises. At first, she explained them away. "The dog jumped on me. I fell." But eventually, her manager pressed harder. Rachel admitted Marcus had hit her. One co-worker later said, "She didn't want anyone to think badly of him. She'd say, 'He's not always like this,' or 'He's just stressed.' But the truth was, he hurt her a lot." The abuse was not isolated. On one occasion, Rachel landed in the hospital with a broken nose and 2 black eyes. In another incident, her boss actually witnessed Marcus strike her in the face during an argument in the Dairy Queen parking lot. When confronted, Rachel tried to downplay it, saying they had just been fighting. By late 2001, Rachel confided in friends through text messages. One of them read, "My boyfriend beat me again. I'm at my mom's. She wants me to stay somewhere safe because he's threatened to hurt us." Despite these terrifying moments, Rachel always ended up back with Marcus. The cycle of abuse was unrelenting: violence, apologies, reconciliation, and then violence again. Her mother Karen described the pattern. He would disappear for days, then come back crying, telling her he loved her, telling her he would change. And she wanted to believe him every time. She wanted her family to work. By early 2003, when Rachel became pregnant, Marcus's control deepened. Tanya recalled, "He told everyone it was his baby. He seemed proud, but at the same time, you could tell he was scared. Whenever they fought, he would just storm out and no one knew where he went." On the night of June 7th, just a day before her murder, she texted her mom, "You think he'd just leave me like this?" She was anxious after discovering Marcus had taken clothes and left without explanation. She even told Karen, "I think I got left." Her mother tried to comfort her, writing back, "If this is how it's meant to happen, at least it's non-violent. Maybe this is your way out." But Rachel wasn't ready to see it that way. She replied, "I'm not seeing it yet." Her stress was obvious. That same night, she admitted to her mother that she had hurt herself out of desperation. "I broke a razor and cut my leg. I told him I was just going to kill myself. I can't get it right." Karen later said those words haunt her. "I told her. Stressing wouldn't help her or the baby. I begged her to hold on." By June 8th, Marcus had returned. Rachel's texts showed both confusion and determination. She wanted to figure things out with him, despite the chaos. Friends noticed the same pattern as always: a fight, a disappearance, then reconciliation. The relationship was a powder keg waiting to explode. 2 young people, one heavily pregnant, both trapped in a cycle of violence and volatility. And on that warm summer night in Stillwater, June 8, 2003, the tension finally reached its breaking point. The night of June 8, 2003, began quietly at the Willow Creek Apartments in Stillwater, Oklahoma. At 9:11 p.m., CCTV cameras captured Rachel Morgan and her boyfriend, Marcus Hill, returning to her second-floor apartment. Rachel, 8 months pregnant, looked distracted as she scrolled through her phone on the walk-up. That was the last time she was seen alive. Inside the building, neighbors immediately sensed tension. Michael and Dana Cooper, who lived directly below Rachel, later told investigators they heard the couple arguing not long after they came home. It started soft, Dana recalled, like they were trying not to be heard. Then it picked up. Rachel's voice was sharper. Marcus was raising his tone. By 9:30, it was full-on yelling. Michael added, "Then it changed. It wasn't just arguing, it was screaming, like someone in pain, like she was trying to muffle it with a pillow." At 9:45 p.m., the sounds turned violent. "The walls were shaking," Dana said. "Our picture frames rattled. It was like furniture slamming." Michael described it more vividly. "It was steady, 4 or 5 heavy thuds, not random, like someone chopping wood. Boom, boom, boom. Then it just stopped." The silence that followed was eerie. For a moment, the Coopers thought the fight had ended the way it usually did, one of them storming off. But this time, neither of them came downstairs. At 10:49 p.m., Rachel's mother, Karen Mitchell, sent her daughter a text. "You okay?" There was no reply. By that point, Rachel was already dead. At 11:57 p.m., surveillance outside the complex caught Marcus leaving. He was dressed differently than before. Dark pants, a hoodie, and a bucket hat pulled low. His face was partly hidden. In his hands, he carried a white laundry basket. The footage showed him hesitate near Rachel's car, as if he had forgotten something. He then walked briskly down the street. Just minutes later, a convenience store camera behind a corner lot caught him again. This time, he was seen hoisting the laundry basket into a large dumpster and tossing in a pile of clothes. Inside that basket, investigators would later discover Rachel's severed head. By 2 a.m., Rachel's car was gone from the apartment lot. It was later found abandoned across town, propped with a handwritten "For Sale" sign taped to the windshield. The bizarre detail left investigators baffled. It looked staged, as if Marcus was trying to erase her presence by pretending she'd simply walked away from her life. Around 2:30 a.m., Marcus showed up at his mother's home. His half-sister, Tanya Hill, remembered being woken up by loud banging on the door. He was pacing outside, sweating. He looked nervous, jumpy. I'd never seen him like that. Once inside, Marcus went straight to the bathroom. Tanya peeked in and was stunned to see him cutting off his dreadlocks, hair he had worn for years and refused to trim. "I asked him what he was doing," Tanya recalled. "He just said, 'Fresh start,' that was it. Nothing else." Marcus then asked his mother for clean clothes. She gave him sweatpants and a t-shirt. The outfit he had been wearing, a hoodie, pants, and bucket hat, was stuffed into a trash bag and placed by the curb. Moments later, Marcus handed his grandmother a strange collection of items. "He gave me a driver's license, a debit card, and some keys," his grandmother said. "I looked down and saw Rachel's picture on the ID. I asked, 'Why do you have her things?' And he just told me, 'I found them on the ground.'" The explanation made no sense. Rachel had been with him all evening. Why would her belongings be in the street? His grandmother pressed again, but Marcus stayed quiet. Back at Willow Creek, neighbors noticed Rachel's apartment lights flickering on and off between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. The upstairs door was left cracked open, but no one came or went. Angela Ruiz, another tenant, later admitted she texted the landlord at 12:10 a.m. "We heard screaming and thumping for 5 minutes straight. It stopped, then started again. The door upstairs is cracked open. Something's not right. The landlord attempted to call Rachel's phone but got no answer. By then, the damage was already done. The morning after, Marcus stayed only a few hours at his mother's house. After showering and eating, he told his family he was going to cut grass and left on foot around 11 a.m. the following morning. Just hours later, Rachel's mother would walk into her daughter's apartment and make the most horrifying discovery of her life. And by that time, Marcus Hill was already on the run. The town of Norman was still reeling from the news of Michael Bennett's arrest. For weeks, neighbors whispered in hushed tones outside familiar brick homes, shaking their heads, unable to comprehend that someone they'd waved to on Main Street could commit such a crime. On that crisp morning of July 15, 2003, Detective Sandra Hughes arrived at the Bennett residence, not with a search warrant this time, but with something far more revealing. The full truth, laid bare by Michael himself. Inside the dimly lit living room, walls lined with family portraits, Michael sat in his worn recliner, hands trembling. Sandra took a seat across from him, notebook in hand, eyes steady but kind. "Michael, it's time to tell us what really happened," she said, voice calm but insistent. His lips quivered. I didn't mean for it to happen," he murmured, barely audible. The room seemed to shrink with the weight of his words. It was supposed to be just a scare. I just wanted her to stop talking, to leave me alone. Sandra's pen paused, her eyes locking onto his. "Leave you alone?" Michael's face contorted with guilt. She kept asking questions about my business, about the money, about the apartment. I got angry. I went over there, and he broke down completely, tears streaming, voice cracking. I didn't know it would end like that. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, some familiar with the Bennetts for years. They craned their necks, hearing faint sobs through the closed windows, each one wondering how a neighbor could harbor such darkness. Detective Hughes quietly pressed Michael for details, how he lured the victim, the confrontation, the panic when she tried to fight back. Every word painted a picture so chilling that even seasoned officers shivered. Forensic evidence collected weeks earlier suddenly made sense. The faint smear of blood found under the sink, the fingerprints on the back door, the discarded glove in the trash. All pieces of a puzzle that now fit together with horrifying clarity. Neighbors like Linda Harper, who had once admired Michael's charm and polite smile, now wrestled with disbelief. "He was always so polite, always waving at everyone," she whispered to a friend. "I never imagined he could do something so cruel." By noon, Michael's confession was complete. Detective Hughes stood, closing her notebook, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "This case isn't just closed," she said to her team. "It's a warning. Evil can hide behind the most ordinary faces." As Michael was led away in handcuffs, the small Norman community felt a collective shiver. The truth had finally surfaced, but the haunting question lingered. How many other secrets were hidden behind their friendly neighbors' smiles? The Bennett house, once a picture of suburban normalcy, now stood eerily silent, a chilling reminder of betrayal, deception, and the day a town's innocence was stolen. It had been nearly 20 years since that fateful night in June 2003. Norman had slowly moved on, the story lingering as a painful memory in the minds of those who lived it. Yet the case never truly closed. Old evidence, collected meticulously by Detective Sandra Hughes and her team, had been preserved, tucked away in the cold storage of the police evidence room, awaiting a technological leap that finally came in 2023. DNA analysis had advanced, and when the old samples were re-examined, the result was undeniable, a match to Michael Bennett. The community, long assuming the case was a closed chapter, was suddenly thrust back into shock. Michael, now in his mid-40s, was arrested quietly early one morning. When officers knocked on his door, neighbors couldn't believe their eyes. Michael had always maintained a low profile, blending into everyday life. But that morning he behaved erratically, shouting, pacing, and making incoherent claims about innocence. Cameras and reporters quickly surrounded the Bennett residence, capturing every moment. Inside the police station, interviews revealed a man unraveling. He alternated between denial and confessions, sometimes lashing out at detectives, other times breaking down in tears. I didn't think they'd ever figure it out, he muttered, voice cracking. Every answer revealed a mixture of guilt, frustration, and fear. A stark contrast to the calm, ordinary neighbor the town had once known. The arrest reopened old wounds. Neighbors who had moved past the case found themselves grappling with memories of that dark March night. Forensic experts praised the meticulous preservation of evidence that had finally cracked the case, proving that sometimes justice, no matter how delayed, can still be served. The trial began in early 2023, nearly 2 decades after the crime that had haunted Norman, Oklahoma. Courtrooms were packed not only with locals, but also with journalists and true crime enthusiasts who had followed the case for years. The air was thick with anticipation as everyone waited to see justice finally served. Michael Bennett, now older and visibly worn by the years, faced the courtroom with a mixture of defiance and resignation. Prosecutors laid out the DNA evidence that had reopened the case, alongside his previous confessions and the chilling details of the crime. Witnesses from the original investigation were called, including Detective Sandra Hughes, who recounted the painstaking effort to preserve evidence and maintain the integrity of the case over 20 years. Family members of the victim spoke with emotion that had not dimmed over the years. "We finally have answers," one sibling said, tears streaming. "It doesn't erase what happened, but at least the truth is known, and justice is coming." Their words resonated with the community, reminding everyone of the enduring impact of violence and the long road toward closure. The defense tried to argue mitigating circumstances, but the overwhelming evidence left little room for doubt. Michael entered a plea, and the sentencing was swift. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Gasps and murmurs filled the courtroom, but a sense of finality settled over Norman. Outside, neighbors reflected on the decades-long journey from shock to resolution. Some were relieved, others sorrowful, but all recognized the lessons of vigilance and justice. Norman had been forever changed, yet the community's resilience shone through, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, truth has a way of prevailing. Detective Hughes addressed the press one final time, her voice steady. "This case proves that no matter how much time passes, the pursuit of justice doesn't stop. Evidence matters, persistence matters, and the truth will always find a way." For viewers following this story, remember, evil can hide in the most ordinary places, but justice, though sometimes delayed, is never denied. If you want more haunting, gripping true crime stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss our next shocking case.